Welcome to Rise and Realign Conversations for the Sensitive Soul. I'm Melissa, and this space is for those of us who feel deeply, love fiercely, and sense the world in ways that are hard to explain but impossible to ignore. Here, we honor your sensitivity as a strength, not something to fix. So today, I'm going to touch on, how as sensitive individuals, we often, you know, don't have a clear understanding of why, our nervous system may feel tense, right? Why we may feel on edge, why, we may be nudged into an emotional release more quickly. Um, why we may experience more crying or more frequent crying, or why we just may feel a bit disconnected from our own heart, our own inner alignment. Um, so I have referenced the highly sensitive series, the 9-part blog in the previous episode. So as usual, just want to touch on it. Today is part 7, and it was called Reconnecting Heart and Spirit, The Journey Home. And so just, it's not uncommon for women that I, work with to question themselves, right? And I certainly remember asking myself these questions too. So I really want to speak to that part of you so that you're not alone, right? That um, I can relate, and there are plenty of other highly sensitive women who can relate as well to feeling like you're too much, like you need to just get it together, or why can't you be normal if that's what you would prefer. Because again, we're often looking outside and seeing how other people are experiencing things, and that can skew our own view of ourself, which I have to say is the most important. It is so important to know how we view ourselves, right? I often, share with women that what someone else thinks of me is none of my business, because it's not going to touch me in the sense of affect me in a negative way, right? If I see that that's a projection from their own, perspective and level of understanding and consciousness, right? So it's more about them. So when we can separate what someone else thinks is about them, you know, the most important thing is what we think about ourselves, right? How we view ourselves, how we understand ourselves. And, I've said it before on, previous episodes. Like, I was raised with, very loving family, um, and so, you know, blessed, when I was 25 to have, met my longtime best friend. Um, but even with the closest of relationships in my life, right? Like, it's been clear that I'm highly sensitive, right? Like, because when we use, Dr. Elaine Aron, the research that she brought together, right, in the early 90s, that established that for humans, right, um, we have this high sensitivity trait in roughly Back then, she said it was 15 to 20% of the population, equal between males and females. And newer research, out of the UK is saying it's more like 20 to 30% now, right? But when we understand that even when we're surrounded by others who love us, if we are on that higher um, side of if you want to call it a scale, right, for people who have the sensory processing sensitivity trait, if one of us is kind of in the mid to high range, and then somebody else is on the higher side, again, it's just pointing to, even if we are highly sensitive, some of us are still um, feeling things more deeply, processing things just a little bit longer, right? So, again, I always want to say, like, this isn't an identity label, right? This is just one piece that can help us understand what makes us a little different so that we can honor our own needs, right? Understand how our mind is working, what our body is communicating, and what do we want to feel connected to in a larger sense, right? And for highly sensitive individuals, that can have the full range from, feeling deeply connected to nature, right? And all kinds of um, indigenous practices, right? Ancient wisdom. Um, it can be religious for some, it can be spiritual, it can be psychic. Like, again, we're all having very unique experiences. So I just want to make it clear that sometimes, you know, when we're growing up and we're exposed to the environmental factors that we are, and the people that we are, we can still question, like, well, why am I this way? Right? Like, can I just be normal like everybody else? Right? So, this is just a reminder that it's actually not accurate, right? Like, we are normal. We're all normal in the sense of whether you have the high sensitivity trait or whether you don't, right? This is a normal yet invisible trait. It's just there's only a minority of us, the research shows, that are born this way. And it can be, I was certainly born and raised in a family where we're all highly sensitive. Um, and so I didn't really pick up on the differences, right? Or that I was a highly sensitive person until I experienced some, challenges in my life, because that's an important part to really understand about this trait. Although, we can say we're all normal whether we have this trait or we don't, there is this differential susceptibility component for those of us who do have the trait. Now, what does that mean? It means that when we are in environments that feel supportive, right, that are healthy, um, you know, and and that can be in the sense of, growing up with, again, parents that care for us, love us, support us, right? Nobody's perfect. So obviously, we're all going to experience times when we're not feeling supported. But if you, just kind of look at your whole childhood, kind of look at those periods and say, yeah, for the most part, I was very much loved and supported, right? So we have the ability, when we are feeling loved and supported, and our environment is healthy, then we have the ability to excel above, right, somebody who does not have this trait. And the opposite is also true. So, if we're in an environment where we're not feeling supported, we're not feeling seen, we're under acknowledged, right? Like, and that can be school, right? Whether that's in our childhood or in our adulthood, right? Um, it could be work environments, right? That don't take into consideration that some people, process at a different pace because of the depth, right? And the consideration, and how in work environments, highly sensitive individuals are not typically, right, the ones who are going to speak up first and therefore be fast decision makers because of that depth of processing. We're going to consider, we're taking in more information so that we can process it and really, again, use that innate, strategic type of thinking. Um, so anyway, back to the environment truly matters as highly sensitive individuals. So this is one of the reasons why I found myself very um, it wasn't necessarily even focused on raising awareness to this high sensitivity trait. It was probably like 13 to 15 years ago when I really discovered what it meant for me as a highly sensitive woman and mom, and how much it just shifted my perspective in ways that were very, very meaningful and powerful. And it was a process to shift my life to really honor my understanding and how to care for myself, in a way that could support my vitality, right? I mean, I feel like we're here to be healthy and happy and live in harmony with each other and nature. Um, But anyway, back to this differential susceptibility. So, this is why it's important that we are assessing for ourselves, right? Like, am I feeling supported in this relationship, with whoever it is, a friend, a colleague, a family member, right? Like, in my work environment, am I feeling heard and understood, right? Like, because that's one layer of our environment, right? But we also need to understand, especially in these times that, we continue to evolve with technology and everything, right? Like, it's so important to understand that as sensitive beings, we are going to experience the impact on our nervous system faster than those who don't have this trait. So that's where, there was a point in my life when, my own health challenges made me, again, explore more about, okay, well, what am I exposing my body to that's not healthy and helpful? You know, um, I had an autoimmune condition. Okay, so what do I need to know, right? And I learned about gluten, and I learned about dairy, and and now there's so much with glyphosate, right? Um, so this is why it's just important to know, like, as a highly sensitive person, it's really, we need, for me, we have to look at the wholeness of who we are, right? Like, this is not just an identity. It's not like, yes, it's referred to as a temperament trait, right? Like, because we are ones who will observe, will pause, right? Like, again, we're not necessarily the people that are going to jump in, to something fast and quick, because we take the time to process and understand things. Although I must admit that also, as highly sensitive people, we can be the least aware if we are overwhelmed, if we are chronically stressed. um, we're not able to see all that we can see when we are tending to ourselves, when we are calm and centered and really tending to our daily needs, right? So I brought, this into this episode because, again, when we think of reconnecting heart and spirit, for me, that journey home is to be able to know and trust ourselves, right? You've heard me say that I see this sensory processing sensitivity trait as sensory intelligence, because of the depth of processing that is that core essential component to having the trait, right? And when we understand that when we are supported, when we feel heard and understood, then it allows us to relax a little bit, right? It allows us to breathe a little slower and a little deeper and start to feel safe in this world, right? And again, being able to trust ourselves, I feel is the biggest piece that um that again it's beyond words to describe the the shift I experience, having self-trust. Um but I know that it's not always the easiest for us to not just experience trust within ourselves, but to trust in the wholeness of our understanding of who we are. And that's what I really love about being a highly sensitive person. I mean, you know, when we understand that we our neuroanatomy is a little bit different, and it allows us to have this broader range of emotional responses, right? So for me, when I'm in awe and appreciation of nature or life, or relationships, I mean, I can just feel so high in the sense of wow, life is incredible, and I'm so curious about the mysteries in life. And, there's so many layers to it that fascinate me, right? But I'm also somebody who, like, I want to celebrate when somebody has something, happy and good that happens to them, right? I'm like, I'm clapping, I'm excited. I'm like, yay, like I'm right there to cheerlead them, right? And I also have that deeper um, emotional range down, right? So again, and that this is speaking to that differential susceptibility component, because we can go higher in our emotional range and we can also go lower. And when I say lower, what I mean is the way we feel it, right? Because I could say I'm feeling a certain emotion, and somebody else who doesn't have this trait can say, well, I'm feeling that too, right? Their experience is just going to be, say, to a different degree, right? So the highly sensitive person is more often going to experience that fuller range. And so sadness and grief, right? Guilt, shame, those are just felt on a deeper level. So this is why, again, it's really important that we are honoring, if we have this trait, how do we care for ourselves in a way that allows us to experience, you know, being designed with this sensory intelligence in a positive way, right? And so this is where really tuning in and understanding yourself, right? Paying more attention in the sense of being in the moment so you can feel what you need to feel without judgment, right? And again, I know it's not the easiest thing to start doing after we've been bracing for a long time, which is one of the reasons why, I have created the Realign Circle for sensitive and strong women in their 20s. Because when I think of how many decades I lived with a nervous system that was on high alert, right? And bracing. You've heard me say, I just thought I was a high strung person and that was normal. I didn't realize that I was in that chronic stress response, right? That what we call sympathetic dominant state, where again, our breathing is shallow, right? And it uses up a lot of our energy. So we're not even accessing our greatest creative potential, right? Or our ability to relax. Oh my gosh, like I it just flashed back to my, mid 20s when um my husband and I would like go on a cruise, and it would take me like 3 days before we could actually even enjoy being there together because that's just life felt so stressful. Even though, again, I had friends, I had family, I had a career, like I had all the things that we, talk about being the American dream and, what we want to make sure, that we have in our lives. But when we don't understand, what it means to have a more finely tuned nervous system, um, it just really kind of boxes us in, um, to live in a more constricted state, which again, that is not, you know, um, it's not health giving, right? Like stress, it ages us more quickly, right? Our reactivity is even faster, right? And as highly sensitive individuals, emotional reactivity is part of having the trait. So if we're not tending to ourself and our well-being, right? Then more often than not, we're going to react quickly, and it may not be how we really want to react, which that's just a whole nother um, path that I could talk about, as far as, how to understand reactions and, what things we may say and do when we're in a more activated state. But I really want to stay true to, um, reconnecting heart and spirit, you being able to understand your sensitive qualities and what that means for you holistically, right? Like how to understand how your mind operates, that physiological response, and also your connection to spirit, to something greater. So I certainly invite you to read that blog if you would like, on my website, realignwithmelissa.com. But I also want to, just again speak to why I feel it's important to offer the Realign Circle for sensitive and strong women in their 20s because, I certainly wish I knew about this trait when I was in my 20s. I definitely feel like it would give me greater understanding of why I was a little bit different. Um, and certainly a way for me to be more gentle with myself because I was always somebody who just, kept pushing, need to do more. I see what needs to be done. That's next on my list to do. I don't really think I lived in the present moment very much, right? Because I was processing so much from what had already happened and I was planning so much for, what was next. And so bringing myself into the present moment was something that, gosh, was probably pretty foreign, other than when I would, attend a yoga class. But yeah, I I feel that with the increase in environmental toxins, right? I mentioned glyphosate before, that's in our food. Um, it's in the soil. There's more toxins in the environment. We're talking light pollution, um, right? We're talking, there's just so many different layers to this. And when women now in their 20s, they're exposed to social media or they're participating in social media, and then how they're seeing themselves compared to others, or not even necessarily comparing, but just feeling that emotional reactivity by what you may learn about. And that can even just be the news too. It doesn't have to be social media, right? So I just want to acknowledge that women in their 20s, who are sensitive and strong, I'm creating this space, and we meet um, the second Monday is the time that we've established. It's the second Monday. So this first gathering will be March 9th at 5:30 p.m. And it's a space that we can come together and I can share the education around this trait. You can ask questions, you know, eh, really, we can work with nervous system awareness, regulation. Um, I love to share about quantum biology and understanding how you can care for your body in a new way of it's a new again it's a quantum biology informed approach. I think it's really powerful for sensitive individuals because it's bringing you back into alignment with you, where you can trust yourself and that you are connected to something greater and you can feel supported, right? In this circle, it's meant for you to feel supported by other highly sensitive and strong women, right? I'm there to facilitate and to guide you back to you, back to how important your environment is, to connect with in a healthy way and to just develop the trust within yourself because we all have our own inner guidance. And, as highly sensitive women, you deserve um, to tend to your unique needs, even if it's so different, right? Potentially, than the roughly 70 to 80% of the population who don't have this trait, right? It's just you need to know you, right? Again, there's no hierarchy. It's just important that you know yourself, right? And that you know how to care for yourself. And you don't need permission from anybody else to do that, but I'm inviting you to be in a circle with other sensitive women so that you have ongoing reminders that you're not alone, and you taking care of you is not selfish, it's essential. And, the conversation can be expansive because as highly sensitive women, there's so much that we can talk about. Um, so anyway, let's remember that we are here together to rise, reclaim, remember. Where the heart leads, the body remembers, and the soul awakens. So before we close, I invite you to return to your breath. Take a nice inhale through your nose, maybe a second inhale just to lengthen your spine and take in a little bit more. And then exhale nice and slow out your mouth. And just feel yourself relaxing, releasing, letting go what you do not need to carry anymore. Again, inhaling through your nose. And again, exhaling out your mouth nice and slow and letting go. Just continue to connect with your breath and your body and to what feels true for you right now. There's nothing you need to fix. Just be here now and tune in to you. And if anyone else listening is ready to rise out of old conditioning and return to your own rhythm, you're always welcome to walk with me. You can listen here each week. You can join my Rise and Realign lunar letter. Or you can explore deeper support through, realignment sessions, integrative intensives. And you can find everything at realignwithmelissa.com/links. So take good care of you. Much love and light.